Western media are talking more and more about people getting tired of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Support for Ukraine is decreasing because the Ukrainians' military's counter-offensive didn't go as everyone thought it would. At the same time, the conflict between the Israel and Gaza Strip has become more intense, grabbing the world's attention. Today we invited Stívena Mura, a founder of charity project called Ukraine Freedom Project, right?
That's me.
And also he is a former chief of staff for a special house Republican to our studio. Hi, Steven. How are you?
Very good, thanks. How are you doing?
Or I what Stepan, as you like.
Yeah. As you like. In America, I'm Steven. In Ukraine, I'm Stepan.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Other media you named as Stepan or Steven?
Sometimes people call me Diego.
Diego?
Alexei. It just depends.
Okay. Russia's war against Ukraine is about to enter its third calendar year. The front line has remained largely unchanged in recent months, unfortunately, but how much could the course of the war change in 2024? Please share your predictions for our audience.
Yeah. So, listen. This is a very unstable time in the history of the world. And so anything could change any number of ways. And right now, I came back to Kyiv at the beginning of last week after spending 2.5 months in the United States and also in Europe. I was at Davos. I spoke at the Ukraine House in Davos. And I got back here and I was greeted immediately by 21 missiles and 20 drones sent here by Vladimir Putin, welcoming me home. And and the U.S. Patriot missiles took out all the Russian cruise missiles. So that's a really great feeling to know that you're protected like that. But with the U.S. Congress not able to act on renewing aid to Ukraine, that's a problem, because how many of these Patriot missiles do we have left here in Kyiv? And so that was something that made me think, and something that to me was a real consequence of congressional inaction. How many Patriot missiles do we have left in Kyiv?
Yesterday, some politics said that Zaluzhny, it's a commander-in-chief of Ukrainian armed forces,
I'm a fan.
leaves the post. Do you heard about it?
Yeah, and I also saw that the Minister of Defense put out like a Facebook post or something. It said, "Dear reporters, this is not true. Thank you." So I thought that was a pretty good way to handle it.
But opinions in society are divided. So this is true or not? And the Minister of Defense said it's not true. But people, what's happened? What do you think about it? To my view, it's a kind of political manipulation, maybe to test the reaction of society and the Western partners too. Do you think the Americans influence our personal changes in government?
That's a good question, one I don't have a good answer to. And I think that Ukrainians have enough problems with missiles and with their friends and family being at the front, and with the general status. It's a tough winter, of all the things that Ukrainians have a problem with. So I think that the political manipulations and whether Zaluzhny's in favor or out of favor or whatever, I think that that's something I think that ordinary Ukrainians shouldn't concern themselves with. Now, in terms of what the Americans want, it's difficult to say, because I've been here myself since day 5 of the war, and what I've seen is that in 2022, the Biden administration did a good job in getting weapons here. and the Ukrainians used them well, and they pushed the Russians back, I don't know, 1,400 kilometers from, the Russians were in Zhytomyr, and now they're pushed all the way back to Donetsk Oblast. And so when the Ukrainians get the weapons they need, they do really good work and they win. And they push the Russians back. Now, in 2023, for whatever reason, the Biden administration started moving more slowly with weapons. They promised tanks in January. The tanks got here in October, something like that. They in February, the F-16s were a bad idea. In May, they were a good idea, and to the best of my knowledge, they're still not here. So when it takes this long to get the vital weapons that Ukraine needs here, then, that's why the counteroffensive didn't go well. And if the Americans want to blame it on Zelensky, I think that's unfair. And I think that, again, when the Ukrainians get the weapons they need, they win. I think when Zelensky, let's look at it this way. If you're a NATO general, I was talking to General Breedlove, who used to be the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. General Breedlove's a very smart man. He was a very powerful general. And he said that if a NATO commander were to undertake a counteroffensive like the one the Ukrainians undertook, they'd want air superiority, numbers superiority, and they'd want superiority with artillery. And the Ukrainians had none of those three, and yet they undertook this counteroffensive. So it's not surprising that the counteroffensive didn't go as well as it wanted to. And again, if someone wants to blame that on Zelensky, that seems like a political problem.
Okay. But by the way, America had a bad reaction to corruption in Ukraine, of course.
As they should.
Have you heard the story about the Grynkevich family?
The which?
Grynkevich family.
Tell me.
Okay. Igor Grynkevich was the largest supplier of the Ministry of Defense in the field of clothes to our soldiers.
Okay.
So in December, he was detained for trying to bribe one of the heads of the State Bureau of Investigations with $500,000 bribe. And so now it's a scandal in our information field for Ukrainians. But you know that the Grynkevich is a businessman. It's not, the Grynkevich are definitely corrupt officials, okay, no way. But people from the Ministry of Defense also took part in it. So how do you think, how do the problems within the Ukrainian government impact the United States, in turn the assistance they provide to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was in Washington, D.C. for most of last fall and in the winter. I spoke to about 100 congressional offices. There's only 535, so I spoke to almost 20% of Congress and their staffs. And everybody in America, everybody on Capitol Hill is worried about corruption because nobody wants to send, the Americans sent $42 billion worth of weapons over here and another 20-some billion dollars in aid. That's a lot of money. That's more money than you and I and probably everyone listening to this combined will see in our entire lives. And so, and Americans want to make sure this is being spent well. And when self-interested, corrupt people take that money, then that makes it harder for Americans to send more money, which makes it harder for Ukraine to defend itself, which makes it more likely that everyone here will be speaking Russian in next year. Because aid to Ukraine is really on the fence. I mean, I can't describe this to your listeners much more than this, that there's a very good chance no more weapons will come from America to Ukraine. And when I'm on Capitol Hill and I'm talking to someone and I'm talking about my friends at the front, and I've been to the front a dozen times myself. And when I make the case that Ukraine is doing good work with the weapons we sent it, they say, well, what about these guys that bribed, the U.S. or the Ministry of Defense for $500,000? How do I answer that? So in my view, these people should be treated the most harsh way possible. Someone needs to be made a terrible example of, so that the next time someone thinks about taking a bribe, they're going to see, well, that guy, the last guy that did this is in prison. He's in solitary confinement. His family is poor and, living in an outhouse in, Zhytomyr Oblast. And, someone needs to treat these people incredibly harshly and make a very big example out of it. So that's the way I look at it.
But about this news, Putin feels more confident because of wavering in the West. His recent public appearance and strong statements suggest that, in his opinion, Russia is committed to staying in this conflict for a long time. What do you think? How long a war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine should be?
I think it should end tomorrow, but I guess we'd have to get Vladimir Putin to agree with that, right? So here's what I'm seeing is that, going back to my example of the Patriots, how many Patriots do we have left? Well, how much more ammunition do we have for the artillery in Zaporizhia Oblast? How much more, how many more bullets do we have for the NATO weapons that have been given to Ukraine? I don't know, and that's a very important question to answer, because if Ukraine runs out of ammunition, then the short war is going to be very short, and it's not going to end well for Ukraine. And again, you've got people like this businessman you mentioned, who is making sure that the Americans don't send any more weapons. So I hope this guy's in prison, and I hope this guy, watches as thousands of people die because the Americans don't want to send any more weapons. Right now they've been debating this for 3 months, since October. And, and it's not getting any easier to convince the Americans to send more weapons. So when you have very bad people engaging in corruption, it kills Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. Right? How many Ukrainians are dying right now because they don't have the equipment they need, because the Americans are not sending any more weapons right now? And so again, these people needed to be treated in the very most harsh possible way, because their selfish actions are killing Ukrainians, killing your friends at the front, killing my friends at the front.
You're right. You're of course right. So how do you see elections in America?
Jeez, if I could predict that, then, a lot of people are calling this a two-person race between Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure that Nikki Haley's out of it yet. Here's the great thing about Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley was Trump's ambassador to the United Nations. Mm-hmm. Very successful governor of South Carolina. She's a very accomplished woman. She's super smart. And she campaigned on helping Ukraine. And, in the last 2 elections, more than half of the Republicans that voted didn't vote for Trump. So in New Hampshire, which was earlier, I guess it was last week, in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley, again, who campaigned on helping Ukraine, got half the vote. So there's a big pro-Ukraine vote out there in the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And so anything could happen right now. Yesterday, Trump spoke well of Putin. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why he does these things, but Putin, among So if Trump is going to win the election, he has to win independent voters. He has to, we call them swing voters, voters that could vote Republican or voters that could vote Democrat. Putin has a 9% approval rating among independent voters. So I don't know why Trump is speaking well of Putin, but I can't imagine that it's going to help him in the general election. And so the unfortunate thing, we have 330 million Americans. And if you look at the polling, only 25% of Americans want Biden to run again. Only 33% of Americans want Trump to run again. And out of 330 million Americans, we picked the least possible, least popular possible candidates. So our election system is kind of messed up.
But Ukrainians should be worried if Trump becomes president.
If I knew what Trump was going to do, if I could get inside Trump's head, I'd be making a lot more money than I am now. So here's what you got to look at. Right now, he is repeating Russian talking points. But before the war, he sent billions of dollars worth of javelins and other weapons to Ukraine that allowed Ukraine to defend itself prior to the Biden administration sending weapons. So, when Poroshenko went to Congress in 2014 and asked for weapons, the Obama administration sent blankets and Trump sent weapons. So what's Trump going to do? I don't know. What's the world going to look like in November? Because if the United States doesn't send weapons before November, then Ukraine is going to have a very difficult time. And if the United States doesn't send weapons to Ukraine, what's that going to say to Xi Jinping, the president of China? What's he going to do? Is he going to then take that as like, okay, well, America doesn't care about the rest of the world, and I can invade China, and America will forget about it in 2 years. I'm sorry, Xi Jinping can invade Taiwan, and then, he thinks, well, America will just forget about it in 2 years. Yesterday, there was 3 American soldiers killed by Iranian-backed Islamic extremist rebels. What are we going to do about that? So the world is changing rapidly, and anyone that thinks that they can predict what's going to happen in November or, what's going to happen in February is, no one can, because this is the most unstable the world's been since I've been paying attention.
What do you think about the informational attack? Come back to a case with Zaluzhny. I think it's informational manipulation to distract society from otherwise events.
Listen, I think that Russia has amazing capabilities with disinformation. The more I learn about it, the more stunned I am at how good they are at manipulating information. So is this thing with Zaluzhny that happened yesterday part of the Russian disinformation campaign? That would be easy for me to believe, because what does Russia want? Russia wants Ukrainians to get crazy. Russia is trying to get inside Ukraine's head. They want you, and they want these guys to be afraid. And they want you to say, just please stop. Take Zaporizhia, take Donetsk, take Crimea, and just stop. So that's what they want. So I think that if Ukrainians are fixated on, Zaluzhny this or that or whatever, I think that's not helpful. Ukrainians need to be focused on winning. What can Ukrainians do themselves, right? Mm-hmm. What can they do? They can help their friends at the front, we just got a bunch of socks. We sent a bunch of socks to guys at the front. We're looking for things that people need at the front. We're trying to help. And I think that's what everyday Ukrainians can do as well. And just stay focused on winning. And you can't control whether Zelensky's in charge or anyone else is in charge. You can't control whether the Americans are going to send weapons. To some degree, you can. Actually, you can voice your extreme outrage at these horrible people who are taking money for themselves at the expense of Ukrainian lives. That's something everyday Ukrainians can focus on. The daily rumor is not helpful.
So how can Ukrainians fight corruption so that America continues to provide assistance? Give some tips.
Listen, I don't need to give Ukrainians tips on how to protest. This is a country that turned millions of people out in the street twice because they're unhappy about things. So, so I don't need to tell Ukrainians how to protest. But, again, who are these people that are doing this corruption? I think the SBU is doing amazing work because, there's these issues of corruption that are coming up and the SBU is finding them. And I'm going to tell you something about America. And I'm hesitant to say this to you because I don't want Ukrainians to become complacent about corruption because, again, if Americans see Ukraine as corrupt, they won't send more weapons. But, in America, our Pentagon cannot pass an audit. They've passed 6 years. They've been audited. 6 years. They have massively failed their audits. In America, no matter who you are, on what political party you support, there's someone on the other side that you think is fabulously corrupt and needs to go to jail and is not. So what's happening in Ukraine is that these people are being found out and they're being punished. Now, are they being punished severely enough? Are enough of them being found out? Are we finding all the corruption, or is this just the proverbial tip of the iceberg? And I don't know that question. I don't know the answer to that question. But again, corruption in Ukraine with military weapons kills Ukrainians, lots of them. And this could be something, the corruption that we're seeing now, it comes back to the United States. And the people who are against Ukraine say, see, this is a corrupt bunch of people. They're taking our money and they're spending it on villas and yachts and Lamborghinis and we don't need to support these people. And so these people who are corrupt are giving Americans an excuse not to send weapons. And they're giving Vladimir Putin a reason to continue to fight.
So everyone must start with yourself, of course. So I'm glad to talk with you. So say to our followers to like, subscribe, and of course donate.
Yeah, exactly.
Donate the armed forces of Ukraine.
Yeah, listen, this hasn't changed. I've been here for 2 years. The armed forces of Ukraine needs the help of the Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainian people need to be forceful and need to take a stand against corruption. And this is what needs to happen. This is your path to victory. Your path to victory is to do away with corruption. So that's what the Ukrainian people need to do. And, listen, you can go to my website, the Ukraine Freedom Project. I have lots of news stories there. Again, it's the ukrainefreedomproject.org. And I want to tell you one more thing, is that your viewers, what they can do is, if they're on LinkedIn, I would suggest reaching out to Americans and thanking them for the weapons they sent. And reach out to people in Texas. Texas is disproportionately against further aid to Ukraine. Reach out to people in Florida. Reach out to people in Alabama. And just tell them, if you're on LinkedIn, there's 4 million Ukrainians LinkedIn. Just buy a few InMails, and it's a very cheap way. Reach out to someone in one of these countries and in one of these states and just say, I'm Ukrainian, and The American Patriot missiles keep my family safe at night. Thank you. And it doesn't have to be much more than that. If you have any questions about what's going on in Ukraine, please ask me. I have friends at the front, my brothers at the front, whatever it is. Americans need to understand that Ukraine's real and that Ukrainians are people like them. And so that's up to the Ukrainian people to reach out on an individual level.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Happy to help.
So we add a link for your film.
Oh, good.
In this interview, okay?
Чудово.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's all.
Дуже дякую.
Me too. Me too. Glory to Ukraine.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
Слава нації.
Ой, смерть ворогам.
Смерть кацапам.